I still remember the sound before I remember the words. That low, careless laugh. The kind people make when they're certain they're safe, when they believe the person standing in front of them doesn't matter enough to fight back. I was holding a piece of chalk in my right hand when someone whispered it, not even trying to be quiet. "She's just the lunch lady." A few heads turned, a few shoulders shook with laughter. No one looked at my face. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, staring at the blackboard like it had personally offended me, feeling the chalk dust cling to my fingers, mixing with the faint smell of fryer oil that never quite leaves your clothes when you work in a cafeteria. I could have said something. I could have corrected them. But I didn't. Not because I didn't care, because I'd learned a long time ago that explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are is like shouting into a closed elevator. Wasted breath. No movement. So I set the chalk down. And I smiled. They thought that smile meant embarrassment. Maybe even surrender. That's the funny thing about being underestimated. People project their own comfort onto your silence. They assume you're small because it makes them feel big. I wasn't supposed to be in that classroom. Not really. The actual teacher had gone on leave, and I was the temporary solution. 2 weeks, maybe less. Just enough time for the administration to say they'd filled the gap. On paper, I was cafeteria staff. Apron, hairnet, clock-in card. Invisible unless someone needed extra ketchup. In reality, I'd lived a few lives before that apron ever touched my skin. But no one in that room knew that, and honestly, that was the point. The school was called Briarwood Prep. All glass hallways and manicured lawns, the kind of place where confidence was inherited, not earned. The students wore their futures like tailored jackets. They spoke with certainty, not because they knew more, but because they'd never been told they were wrong. I watched them watch me. The smirks, the quick glances at my shoes, the way a couple of boys in the front row leaned back, arms crossed like they were already bored. One of them, tall, perfect haircut, expensive watch he didn't pay for, raised his hand before I even spoke. "So, are we actually doing real math today?" he asked, voice dripping with polite disrespect. "Or are we just following the substitute packet?" A few laughs again. I nodded slowly like I was considering the question, then turned to the board. "Let me ask you something first," I said. "How many of you think math is just rules and formulas?" Almost every hand went up. "And how many of you think it's about understanding how things move, change, break, and rebuild?" No hands. I smiled again. This time it wasn't for them, because that told me everything. See, when you've been knocked down hard enough, you develop a strange relationship with patience. You stop needing to prove yourself right away. You start waiting for the moment that matters. That moment didn't come all at once. It crept in through small cracks. A girl stayed after class that afternoon. Quiet, young, eyes sharp but tired, like she'd been fighting battles no one noticed. She stood by the door, backpack hugged tight against her chest. "Can you explain that last part again?" she asked. "The way you approach the problem? I've never seen it done like that." I grabbed a scrap of paper from my bag, old habit, and sketched out an alternative path. No big speech, no flexing, just clarity. Her eyes widened. "Oh," she whispered, "that makes sense." That word sense is dangerous. It threatens people who rely on confusion to feel superior. The next day, the department head sat in the back of the room, arms folded, watching me like I was a suspicious package. After class, he pulled me aside. "You need to stick to the approved curriculum," he said, adjusting his glasses. "These students are preparing for competitions. We can't afford experiments." "Experiments," I nodded. "Of course." I didn't tell him that the method he called an experiment was older than his tenure, or that I recognized his published work on site, or that I'd once trusted a man who looked just like him. Some truths don't need to be spoken. They just need to be placed where everyone can see them. The whispers grew louder after that. Parents complained. Students joked. Someone left an anonymous note in the faculty mailbox that read, "Let the lunch lady serve food, not ideas." I laughed when I saw it, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. What they didn't see were the after-hours moments, the empty classroom, the girl at the board struggling, failing, trying again, the way her shoulders straightened when she realized she could do more than survive. They didn't see the way math stopped being something she feared and became something she owned. The breaking point came fast. There was a meeting. There's always a meeting when power feels threatened. I sat alone at the end of a long table while Suits spoke over me. Words like standards, reputation, risk. No one asked me a question they didn't already have an answer to. Finally, someone said it out loud, gave shape to what everyone was thinking. We can't let a cafeteria worker redefine academic rigor. There it was, clean, sharp, public. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had once written proofs that made rooms go silent, the same hands that now served mashed potatoes to kids who barely looked up. I could have fought then, pulled credentials, told stories, named names. Instead, I stood. "Thank you for your time," I said calmly. "I understand." They thought that was the end. It wasn't. A week later, there was a competition. State level, big stage, cameras, pressure thick enough to taste. The girl, the one they overlooked, was competing. I wasn't allowed near the floor. No badge, no title, just another face in the crowd. She struggled on the final problem. I could see it from the stands. The way her chalk hesitated, the way doubt crept into her posture. Then she paused, closed her eyes, and changed direction. She approached the problem the way I'd shown her, not from force, but from understanding. She transformed it, turned chaos into structure, fear into clarity. When the judges asked her to explain, her voice didn't shake. "This method was developed years ago," she said. "It reveals patterns you can't see if you only follow the rules." Someone in the crowd shifted, uncomfortable. A folder appeared. Evidence, dates, receipts. The world pretends don't matter until they do. The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet, exposed quiet. I didn't smile then. I didn't need to. By the end of the day, people who wouldn't say my name were suddenly saying it very carefully. Offers came. Apologies too, the kind that arrive late and expect forgiveness as a bonus. I declined them all, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. I went back to the cafeteria the next morning, tied my apron, served breakfast, same as always. But something had shifted. People looked at me differently. Not because I'd changed, but because they had. And that's the part they never talk about. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it teaches, sometimes it picks up a piece of chalk and lets the truth do the talking. I walked out of that building a few weeks later for the last time. No speech, no ceremony, just the sound of my footsteps echoing down a hallway that had finally learned my name. So let me ask you something and be honest. Do you think people change how they treat you when they discover your worth? Or do they just reveal who they were when they thought you had none? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one.